And it's my pleasure to welcome to the Today's Leader podcast, Building Tomorrow's Best Leaders Today. Please welcome Dr. Raman K Attri. How are you, Raman?
I'm doing great, Tony. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
No worries. It's our pleasure to have you on the podcast. Walk me through, you've got a really unique life story as to where you are nowadays. So walk me through, I suppose, the condensed version of the Dr. Raman K Attri story.
Right. Okay, so I'll start with my childhood. In the childhood, when I was 6 months old, I got polio, and as a result, I lost my ability to walk. And ever since then, that disability has defined me, who I was yesterday, who I am today, and potentially it's going to define me, who I will be tomorrow. So part of that one, I lost my ability to walk and I lost the speed. So I think I had some bad experiences in childhood that basically, I made a pact with myself that someday I'm going to be moving fast in something else.
Yeah.
And that's something else I found learning. So that's how I I went through my journey and I mastered this art and science of speed. That how do you learn faster? How do you perform faster? How do you stay ahead in the market? So I created the entire science around this. So today I am the performance thought leader. I have written several books on this particular topic, and I am educating executives and professionals how they can bring those strategies in their own context. So that's the condensed version, that the thing I lacked, I kind of mastered the same thing in another area.
Yeah, it's the story of taking a disability and turning it into a superpower, fundamentally, isn't it? So, when I look at some of the work that you're doing online, some of the talks that you do, some of the programs that you offer, they are really focused around the concept of speed or bringing learning into effectiveness quicker and with greater sustainability. So walk me through some of that. Why was that such an area? Now, obviously, I can understand it from your childhood and the inability to walk, but what got you started with that? Was it just a mindset? And then walk me through that little navigation of that journey.
Yeah. So in the early age, years of my life, I was all alone. So I didn't have any coach. I didn't have any mentor. And I was just struggling with myself. And then I figured out that if I put my focus on learning, I probably can be somewhere. But, the problem is that in our school, colleges, universities, even at workplace, people don't teach us how to learn better. People don't teach us how to learn faster. Even the subject matter experts focus too much on content and subject expertise, but they don't teach us the strategies or technique, how we can leverage learning. But on the other hand, when we see learning is a foundational thing in our life, in professional and personal life, right? We can't progress unless we learn something.
Yeah.
So that was the thing which I say, if I'm not finding any help, most likely other people are also not finding that kind of help. So it was not that, disability was the only thing. I found that every other person had this challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, particularly in school. So the moment I mastered that art, what I found is that people started coming to me. I started building the whole big network. And then I realized that this is the area that's going to take me forward. And ironically, when I joined the professional world, I found that the gaps were even bigger.
Okay.
Managers and leaders expect a lot from their employees, but they don't provide the infrastructure or a kind of mechanism for them to progress forward. It's mostly driven by harsh timelines, I would say.
Yeah.
Employees are given pretty hard timeline and they are supposed to deliver it. But nobody's actually teaching them how to master those things in a shorter time possible. So as you see that right from the childhood in my school and my university and professional world, I kind of saw that gap. So even though it kind of my interest originated from my disability, but it was all over. And then I figured out why so? And then I realized that most of those strategies are contained in those academic journals. There's a lot of research happening, but those are not coming to the common people. Those are not coming to managers or leaders. So I thought, I want to bridge this gap. That how do we take science and make it simple for managers and executives to understand? And that's where I started writing so many books.
And I guess when Raman, when we talk about people in business and we talk about business leaders, one of the complaints that I'll often hear from senior leaders, CEOs, is navigating that concept of return on investment on their training. They understand that they need to train their people. They understand they need to train their leaders, but often there is a perception that it's hard to justify the return on investment. So when we look at your model and it's about increasing that speed and that ability to create traction, I suppose, much quicker. What sort of success, how would you rate the success of the organisations that you work with compared with ones that are maybe working on a more traditional model?
Yeah. Very good question, Tony. I think that this is the context really in which I work in. I was a training leader. I worked in training domain for many years, and I loved training. And when I went out to do research with bigger organizations, and I started with training, I kind of asked them this question: how training is helping you? How are you making sure that your training is helping your employees move forward faster?
Yeah.
And interesting finding was they said, training actually pulls people down. It actually slows people down. So it's a counterintuitive.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy for me to digest in the beginning, but when I looked at the entire thing, that how they speed up their employees, I found that the training plays only a very small part in the overall equation. And if we want to bring our employees or teams faster, or business leader want to move their operations at a faster speed, they're going to need to have technologies. They're going to need to have ecosystem. They're going to need to have mentors, coaches, and a whole network of people that surround that team. So training was a very tiny part. And more often in training, people don't learn the skills they really need in order to produce the outcomes.
Yeah.
What they learn is activities. They learn tasks. They learn those things which go into the job, but they don't learn how to produce the outcome. And unless they produce outcome, they won't make a difference on the business. And I think that's the big problem. Many executives keep focusing on this ROI for the training. But the problem is training is only a small part of the overall equation.
Yeah.
So if we're going to only focus on that tiny part, it's never going to give us a proper ROI, I would say.
I like the concept there that you spoke about with the ecosystem, because, fundamentally the very successful organisations have that ecosystem, or a much better ecosystem than others that don't. And that ecosystem is really firmly entrenched on, concepts around continuous improvement, innovation, doing things better, open curiosity, having a coaching framework there for leaders. And often when we see that in organisations, you can actually see that the reason for their successes. So it's interesting. Yeah, I think you've nailed it. That framework, that ecosystem, and then the actual formal training. See, one of the things where leaders, I see that leaders get it wrong. They focus on the training, but then when people have finished the training is finished, and people say, how was the training? And people will say things like, it was fun, we did some activities, it was enjoyable, I learned something, I'm not sure what, I'm not sure how I'm going to put it into practice. And then in the meantime, their function, their division, their branch, whatever, wherever they're working, we're missing them for whatever the length of training was. It might have been a day session, it might have been 2 or 3 days. So all of a sudden they've come back to the pressures of the role, and it's almost like the training retention just isn't there anyway. So they've undertaken the training, but they haven't really benefited from the training. Now, if their leader came back and said, okay, what did you learn and how do we implement it? And I'm going to be your role model because I've also done the training. That's when we start to see some traction, I'd imagine. So,
yeah. But there are, kind of little difficulties in that model. For example, in one of my organization I was working with, they had this financial analyst. They hired lots of financial analysts. Their job was to pull the data and create business dashboards. And the idea was these guys will be working with the executives, go into the boardroom, and then help executive make decisions from the data, that are what the trends look like from a financial standpoint, be able to either supplement or able to contradict the decisions. Now, these guys were trained in the classroom, 5-day training course.
Yeah.
And that training course was designed by IT geeks, those who Excel, cloud software, dashboard, those kind of things. And they were trained in a very safe environment, gave them all the tools to create dashboards. Yeah. But guess what? Most of these financial analysts failed because they were supposed to present those decisions to executives. Nobody ever taught them that pressure. Wow. So when you are in front of CEO explaining or contradicting a CEO's decision based on the data, you need different set of skills. So those skills were not taught in the training because training was very functional. It was more based on the technical tools they're going to need to use. Yeah. But if we look at this one, the real world is not as safe as training world. Yeah. So we need to make sure that we need to connect these together. And more often training focus on activities. Yeah. But not the outcome or the environment in which those outcomes need to be produced.
And I could just imagine those dashboards look pretty schmick because that was where the focus of the training was. But then that ability to influence and persuade and to actually utilize that data or the dashboards to make better business decisions would be lacking. So, yeah, that's a really, really good point. So walk me through some of the processes, I guess. If a client was to contact you and say, we need to have a chat, talk me through how you start that process with them.
My first question typically to them is, what kind of business metrics are you using? What matters to you the most in business? And for most organizations, there are few things which will always matter. And there will be typically depend upon their business nature or something. And then I ask them that what metrics are important to you? How are you measuring the success of your business? And they explain me that. And then I ask them to relate it. Now tell me, what is the success of your employees? How do you relate business success with employee success? Is it one and same thing, or are you measuring two different things? More often, companies measure different things. Yeah. That's the problem. When we measure employee success differently and business success differently, all the time we try to keep aligning employees to the business goal. And that's where the whole conflict or misalignment, and then companies spend millions of dollars on engagement surveys and those kind of things. They can't figure out why people are not engaged. If we don't measure people the way business is measured, we're never going to go anywhere. So some of the things like I say, okay, all right, if your business measurement is sales per month, how does it translate to employees' goal? Are you setting up a goal like every employee will be considered proficient if they are going to generate $1 million sales per month consistently? If that's a relationship, you're good. But if that bridge is not there, then the next level of conversation need to happen. And then what I do is I help them establish the outcomes, and then those outcomes are translated to employees' outcome. In a reality, it should be one and same thing. Whether you're looking at employee dashboard or business dashboard, it shouldn't be two different things. But again, things need to be communicated to executive in the same language. And so that's I think, big challenge. So when I work with the clients who would want to transform their system, then I ask them how and where your training is helping you. And more often the answer is no, it's not helping us, or we can't figure out why it's not helping us. And then I ask them to kind of map out their ecosystem, that in the entire journey, tell me how employee is getting supported. And the last part of that conversation typically revolves around managers. I ask them, tell me what managers are particularly doing in order to drive that kind of equation. And more often I have found that managers are not even involved in the entire equation because they're too busy either making presentation slides or presenting in the meeting. They don't focus on this employee development part, or they don't have the skills to be able to focus employees. So that's the core concept of how I work through that entire call to understand where exactly those gaps are. If I realize that the organization do not have a goal to shorten the time employees or team members or leaders take to become really good, then essentially their business model is different. It's not something which is speed focused.
Yeah.
The moment you have a speed focus, you have to have a measurement. You can't simply use the word accelerate, because accelerate A, B, C has no meaning unless there are measurement and unless you as a leader say, let's cut this 20% time out from the equation.
Yeah.
So I keep focusing on those metrics, how they measure, how they track, how they cut the time out. And if they're not doing it, they're probably going to need to have more discussions with me.
So you've written a number of books, I see, but you've got the latest one I think is called Speed Matters. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's right. Speed Matters is my latest book. I have written mainly for executives and CEOs and business leaders. I have done a lot of research for about 1 decade, particularly on how organizations can bring speed culture in their organizations, how they can revamp the whole transformation system in a way that it helps employees and leaders to move forward at a faster rate. But I realized one thing that, there's a lack of education. People, as I said, most leaders would say, let's accelerate digital transformation.
Yeah.
But what exactly the accelerate mean? How do you measure acceleration? How do you know you're moving slow or faster compared to the market? How do you position yourself? How do you baseline? So that entire science was missing from leadership discussions. So then I thought, I'm going to bring in a book which will educate executives to that level so that they are aware that there has to be a measurement, how they can measure their speed, how they can baseline it, how they would know that whether their employees are at the competitive edge or not. And particularly in pandemic, this book has become very relevant because in pandemic, we needed speed. Our employees, our leaders, our managers struggle to even adopt new technology at a faster rate.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of brought in the whole concept that let's start educating our leaders. And then once they understand the value, then comes the next step, which is the implementation part of speed. And for that one, my next book is coming, what I call Get There Faster.
Okay. The pandemic has really certainly opened up so many executives' eyes to everything that's happening around them. It really has accelerated the conditions, the environment in which we operate. It's accelerated the use of technology. And for those leaders and organisations that are still struggling with that, like we're more than 18 months into this pandemic and we still have organisations that are struggling with this. We still have people muting themselves on Zoom calls. Sometimes maybe intentionally they're doing it, but there are so many people that struggle with the concept of technology, and I guess the lack of connection that they perceive within that. So I think your book is certainly at a most timely juncture in the history of the world, Raman. So
yeah, I never planned that way, by the way, because I was working on speed for last 10 years.
Yeah.
I have released a couple of books, but then it was kind of thing. And as you said, our employees struggled even to, use Zoom software. It's not a simple thing. But then imagine the complex skills, what they're going to need to produce the technologies like semicon, mobile, communication, servers, chips, IC chips, or all those kind of things. They are going to need a tremendous amount of time to come up to speed. But then you can't wait because you need that transformation today.
Yeah. And if you're not doing it as a business leader, it means that your competitors are probably going to be doing it. And the last thing that you need with all the anxiety and stuff that's happening, uncertainty within the world, is for your competitors to make a giant leap forward while you're still struggling to hang up from a Zoom call, which is fundamentally maybe a good metaphor for the time. So,
right.
And I would imagine the business leaders like the concept of speed.
Yeah, they do like, but here's the problem that they don't have proper understanding about the concept of speed. Because if you talk to most leaders, for them, we work on speed, we have speed savvy culture, and I ask them how. They say, we push very hard employees, we put aggressive timeline, we want to make sure that we respond to customer quickly, and we make sure that our projects are getting finished quickly.
Yeah.
But then I ask them that what exactly it is doing is, it is putting your employees in pressure, it's giving them the burnout. Finishing a task quickly is not the speed. You can finish a project quickly, but that would possibly also mean you didn't give your employees enough time to learn and master the thing.
Yeah.
And unless their quality is up to that level, whatever you deliver to customer is going to be shallow. And more likely, you're going to need to rework it. Customer is either going to reject it or customer is going to say, okay, all right, I got other options. So they are going to leave and you're going to lose revenue. Maybe in the beginning, it seems like we are very fast, but the total overall time taken to closure, I would say, is pretty long. And part of that one is we are putting a lot of pressure on employees. We are driving aggressive timeline. Customer once gone is gone. So it's a bigger repercussion. So I tell them that the right kind of speed is sustainable speed, something which will continue giving you the competitive edge. And the competitive edge you're going to get when you produce first time right.
Yeah.
And the first time, that the time you need to focus is shortening how you can build your employees, your leaders, your manager to be able to produce that first time right, that it doesn't need any rework. So part of that, what we're saying is, first time right comes with a specific kind of performance from employees, leaders, and managers.
Yeah.
And if we are able to shorten that time while not compromising on the quality, the speed we're going to get is far better than our competitors.
Yeah.
And competitor will wake up someday, obviously, but by that time you're already ahead of them. They will take many years to really catch up with you. But by that time, you'll be able to make your mark in the market. So that's the kind of thing that the real speed is sustainable, first time right speed.
Yeah. It's so speed can come without, because I know the minute I talk about speed with leaders, they're going to talk about unrealistic timelines and deadlines, and I think what you've encapsulated there is really critical, that, you know, ultimately those sorts of speeds, if they're enforced without the framework, you are ultimately going to create some burnout. It also reminds me very firmly of Stephen Covey Jr.'s book, The Speed of Trust, where we see organisations that do have high levels of trust operate quicker and at a less cost, because speed to them means that we're removing bureaucracies and compliance, because we've got that trust that the job's going to be done right the first time. So I think that's a really, really important aspect of speed. Is that part of your framework as well, cutting through bureaucracy or red tape, or is that just becomes a byproduct?
Yes, I would say that at organization level, there are a lot of different factors, red tape and bureaucracy and the whole process complication we create most likely will slow down the organizations. Yeah. And that has happened because when organizations start growing in size, their level of bureaucracy, their number of layers of management, their processes, their check marks, and the gatekeeping, it keep growing. They never streamline those kind of things. And that's the primary reason why the managers keep getting disconnected from their employees. So more time they keep spending with the executive, trying to explain their operation in the meetings, and they hardly spend any time with their employees. So we say, manager's job is to really work with employees. When your employees are great, they're going to produce the great outcome, which is going to make you look good, and ultimately customer is going to like it. But what happens is this bureaucracy or red tape puts managers and leaders into these meetings and a lot of non-value added discussions. So they get derailed from the main aspect of employee development. Yeah. And many times they will leave their employees to the mercy of training department. Or if they are not putting them on mercy of training department, many of them would say, go sit with Joe. And if Joe is not available, then just look for Jim. Figure it out. So when because managers are focused on delivering what their processor or bureaucracy is dictating them. They are busy there. So I think we need to cut that noise out in order to make sure that managers need to focus on number one asset in the company, which is their employees, their team member. Once they do it right, lots of needs for meetings and process-related noise will go away. It wouldn't be even needed.
Noise, corporate noise. I call it corporate haze, because we just get caught up in this haze of meetings and haze of uncertainty and ambiguity, and agendas, and it's just one of those things that are just frightening in organisations. And it's a leader's role to be trying to cut through that corporate haze. So
yeah, I mean, part of that one is one thing which these days a lot of trend engagement surveys.
Yeah,
I think every big organization is using engagement surveys, and they have made this engagement over glorious. And how they handle it is, every year, they're going to launch a glorious survey. They're going to compile the data. They're going to hire a consultancy who will do all the data analytics for them, give them beautiful looking graphs, and then guess, okay, these looks kind of red. Let's fix these things. But fixing engagement is very simple. Just need to make sure that we care for our employees. We are there when they need us. And at the same time, we give them sense of achievement. The moment we give them sense of achievement, they go home happy because they got this pride that today I did something meaningful, wonderful. Once we start giving that feeling to employees on a daily basis, guess what? We're never going to need this entire bureaucracy of engagement surveys ever.
Yeah.
But managers don't really take engagement that way. So that's why this whole set of complicated processes are there. I think that will slow us down. I mean, how much time we spend on this whole process of engagement survey? We could have used it somewhere else.
Engagement surveys are just like a topic in themselves, Raman, in many, many ways, aren't they? And it's an unfortunate thing that we... I suppose the positive is that organisations are in some ways taking engagement really, really seriously. But by the same token, it just becomes another measure. And ultimately, you can feel engagement. You can walk into a team, you can walk into a department, you can walk into a branch, and you can feel the engagement. You can feel the culture. And sometimes that's really, really hard. You can walk into a business that gets really high levels of survey results out of an engagement survey, and it feels cold, it feels tense, there's an undercurrent, and yet they've got something on the wall that says they're a highly engaged workforce. And, that's one of the challenges that because it just becomes another thing to measure, and often... And I've seen this happen in my career where team members or staff just say, look, I'm just going to tell them what they want to hear because it makes my job easier. So because often when you have a engagement survey or a value survey that's gone off the rails a little bit, all of a sudden there's focus groups, there's meetings, there's all this haze that comes up. How do we fix it? How do we fix it? And team members or staff members just say, no, I don't have time for that. So I'm just going to tell them what they want to hear, even though it may not be the reality. So, and that's the disappointing thing. Raman, who's inspired you in your leadership journey?
Actually, in my entire journey, I didn't have enough coaches, I would say. I kind of worked through myself. So most of my things came from research. But Jim Collins' books have been pretty inspiring to me. Yeah. I follow a lot of approaches from his books because he and his team, they do very systematic corporate research, and then they bring in pretty practical strategies. So that's the kind of model I have been using in my personal as well as professional life, that, okay, let's look at the data. Let's look at what's happening. Probably we can draw upon few practical strategies out of that one. Yeah. So that's what my inspiration is.
Okay, excellent. So tell us about your relationship with failure, because we go through these journeys. We've got a leadership, we've got businesses. We're never on this upward trend all the time. There's always going to be some downs, some bumps along the journey. So tell me about your relationship with failure and how you work with that.
I think failure has been part of my life. I mean, ever since I have become cautious about my disability, I have faced a failure at every moment. Even walking is failure for me. I mean, it took me many years to master walking with my walking crutch. Otherwise, I was mostly crawling on the floor. So that's how my journey with the failure started. And I learned that failures could be the lessons. Yeah. And once we keep trying, we learn the lesson. The failure is when we don't learn the lesson from failures. Yeah. So that's it takes us nowhere. But at the same time, also, I realized one thing. we keep trying for failure, but at some point in time, we will know this, that it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And at that point of time, I think most people will use this blind willpower that, I can't fail. I need to really pass through this one. In those situations, I have rather thought that how can I leverage whatever I learned in the failure, whatever collateral I created during the failure, can I leverage it differently? For example, at one point in time, I did start the business, but I failed miserably. But all those experimentation I did, I then repositioned those in the corporate world, and that's where I kind of got all my leadership and management successes.
Yeah.
So I think it's a part of that one, how we really use failures. And personally, as a researcher, when it comes to speed, what I realized is that there are a lot of experiments out there when people are exposed to failures, whether it is business, project, or otherwise. The number of failures you face, if we increase that rate and we shorten the time in which you are going to face those failures, your speed to learn and mastery is shortened big time.
Yeah.
Now, it might be counterintuitive because the moment you're going to face the failure, you're going to slow down.
Yeah.
It's going to be a kind of wall for you. How are you going to cross? But again, we're talking about long-term success, that your long-term time to mastery will go down big time if you leverage failure. So now in science, they call it productive failures or deliberate failures.
Yeah.
Particularly those pilots and all that, they are being trained that way. They are exposed to the failures at a very high rate, higher rate than normal. So then their whole senses get accustomed to this new rate of failures. So when they fly the plane, they are much more proficient compared to any other pilot trained traditionally. So I think from a business standpoint, my philosophy is that we need to accept the failures and keep learning from our failures and leverage it.
Yeah. And part of what you were talking about there just really resonated as well. So there's the concept of failing fast and failing forward, and that all multiplies our learning benefits if we take the learnings. But being able to identify, being able to fail quickly, take the learning and continue on is probably foreign to so many leaders, because part of their mindset is about not failing. And as many entrepreneurs will tell you, if you're more interested in not failing, you are potentially not doing anything. So you're stuck, you're procrastinating, you're waiting for everything to be perfect. And we know that never happens in business. So the ability to actually embrace the concept of and take on the risk of failure, because we know that that's going to make us better, whether it's as leaders or whether it's within the business itself, that's a really good learning, and it's a really good way for leaders to be thinking about. If you're thinking about not failing, you're not doing enough. You're not taking enough risk. You're not being bold. You're not being courageous. But it is truly about failing, taking the learning, and then moving on. So that's a fantastic trait that you brought up there, Raman. So I hope that leaders really do take that on board. So what are you currently reading? I mean, you mentioned Jim Collins. We've mentioned your book. So what are you currently reading now?
Right now, I am to more writing, I would say. So my reading days are sort of kind of over. I'm kind of producing lots of books.
Yeah.
So I right now currently not reading anything actively, but I'm writing a lot because I got 4 books to lined up for coming up in this one probably this year, and then 3 next year.
Yeah. That's pretty exciting. So what's the vision for you moving forward? Obviously, there's 4 books in the pipeline. So
I'm kind of, it's of this philosophy that people need to be able to learn fast as and when they need it.
Yeah.
During their workflow or on the go. So part of this one, I have been trying to think about a platform that how I can bring in all these things together. For example, like if you are stuck into a problem, so who do you go for help very quickly? Most likely you're going to go to YouTube for videos or something. But what if a targeted learning can be delivered to you to solve that particular problem at the moment when you really need it? So those will accelerate your learning and time to mastery. And the whole idea is you spend more time doing the thing and less time learning the things.
Yeah.
So when that happens, your speed to attain your outcome will be faster. So I am envisioning right now a sort of platform that will help people, on their fingertip, how they can learn things, and learning not just about watching videos. We're talking about maybe, you don't learn good from video. Maybe you don't learn from reading. All you need is somebody's verbal advice for 3 minutes on certain thing that can do wonder for you. So how you can get that kind of access to experts instantly? Is there somebody around you who can really help you?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of thinking about a platform that can integrate the multidimensional content depending upon your needs, depending upon your preferences, the same thing which will allow you a sort of option. Do you want to learn via video? Same thing via text or audio? Do you want a one-on-one conversation with somebody or something else?
So bringing the concept of micro learnings into instant sort of, so I'm while you were talking about that, I'm imagining an app that a leader could be saying, I've got a tough conversation coming up with Joe Bloggs. I need a quick refresher. Bang, there we go. So that sounds awesome. Sounds awesome. So is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you? Raman.
No, I think, Tony, you did a wonderful job. Thank you so much for those great lineup of questions. I think we addressed all aspects of learning, leadership, and business, and all whatever is important in contemporary times. So I really appreciate it.
Excellent. So, Raman, how can people connect with you?
And the best way is my website. It's ramankatri.com. But otherwise, I am on most social media. I just need to find the Dr. Raman K Attri. That's it. And they'll be able to connect with me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, or other platforms.
Excellent. Dr. Raman K Attri, it's been a pleasure having you today on the Today's Leader podcast. I thank you for your investment in today's leaders.
Thank you so much, Tony. It has been my pleasure being on your show. Really appreciate it.